Walk into any supermarket, one thing you'll notice is that the bread is always fresh. That kind of consistency feels normal now, but it actually isn't. Bread, as most people understand it, is supposed to change with time, lose softness, and eventually go off. But supermarket bread doesn't seem to age at all. So what's really happening here? The answer isn't better baking or fresher ingredients. It's the way modern supermarket bread is manufactured, using chemical treatments and industrial processes designed to suppress natural aging. These treatments keep bread artificially fresh, often at the expense of our health when consumed regularly. In this video, we're going to break down what's been added, why it's used, and exactly why this fresh supermarket bread never goes off. Bread that ignores time. For most people, bread has always followed a simple, predictable pattern. You buy it fresh, you enjoy it for a short window, and then it starts to change. It dries out, it loses softness. Eventually, it goes stale or shows signs that it's past its best. That's not a flaw, that's how bread is supposed to behave. But supermarket bread quietly breaks that rule. You can leave it on the counter far longer than you expect, and it barely seems affected. The texture holds. The appearance stays the same. It feels familiar enough that most people stop noticing how unusual that actually is. Bread that ignores time isn't a sign of quality, it's a sign of interference. Real bread begins changing the moment it leaves the oven because moisture moves, starches harden, and microorganisms do what they naturally do. When those changes don't happen, something is preventing them. In modern supermarket bread, that prevention is intentional. The dough is formulated to slow staling, stabilize structure, and delay visible aging. This is achieved through a combination of processing methods and chemical aids that interrupt the natural life cycle of bread. Instead of aging, naturally the loaf is held in a controlled state, designed to look and feel fresh for as long as possible, regardless of time. The result is bread that behaves less like food and more like a managed product. While it may look reassuring on the shelf, its refusal to age is the first signal that it has been fundamentally altered. This kind of bread isn't designed around nourishment or tradition, it's designed around consistency, shelf life, and logistics. And when aging is suppressed, so are the natural cues that tell us food is changing. Over time, regularly eating bread that's been engineered to resist normal breakdown raises questions about what's actually being consumed and how far removed it is from the bread people once recognized as food. And if you think bread ignoring time is strange, wait until you hear where much of this fresh bread is actually made before it ever reaches the supermarket. That's coming up next. It's not baked where you think. When most people see freshly baked bread in a supermarket, they picture dough mixed on site, left to rise and baked from scratch that same day. That image carries trust. It feels closer to home baking, simpler and somehow healthier. But in reality, much of this bread has already lived a long life before it ever reaches the store. What looks fresh is often bread that was made elsewhere, partially baked, frozen, transported, and only finished in-store to create the smell, warmth, and appearance shoppers associate with freshness. This matters for health because bread designed to survive freezing, transport, and long storage cannot rely on traditional methods alone. To endure that journey, the dough is treated to remain stable under extreme conditions. Chemical processing aids and stabilizers are used to protect structure, control moisture, and prevent breakdown during freezing and thawing. These steps are not part of traditional bread making, and they are not introduced for nutritional benefit. They exist to make bread resilient enough for an industrial supply chain. The problem is that bread engineered to withstand this process is already far removed from what the body expects when it comes to food. The structure of the bread is altered before it even reaches the oven in the supermarket. By the time it's finished in store, it may look fresh, but it has been chemically supported at multiple stages to stop natural aging and spoilage. What you're eating is not freshly made bread in the usual sense. It's a product that has been carefully preserved to appear fresh at the final moment. From a health perspective, this creates distance between appearance and reality. Bread that has been frozen, stabilized, and chemically protected is designed first for survival and consistency, not for how gently or naturally it is processed by the body. The baking you see in store is often the final step in a long, controlled process, not the beginning. And that misunderstanding leads many people to consume this bread believing it is closer to traditional food than it really is. The next point is even more important, because once you look at the ingredient list, it becomes clear just how far the recipe has drifted from what bread used to be. The recipe is no longer simple. There was a time when you didn't need to read a label to understand bread. You already knew what was in it. Flour, water, yeast, salt. That was the recipe. And it worked because bread wasn't expected to last very long. Today, that simplicity is gone, even though the product still looks familiar. Supermarket bread relies on ingredient lists that are far longer and far more technical than most people realize. And that change didn't happen by accident. The reason the recipe expanded is directly tied to shelf life. Once bread is expected to stay soft, flexible, and sellable for days or even weeks, basic ingredients are no longer enough. Additional substances are introduced to strengthen the dough, control moisture, improve texture, and slow down staling. These include conditioners, emulsifiers, and preservatives that help bread survive modern production and distribution. While they are allowed for use, they are not added to make bread more nourishing or easier for the body to process. Their role is functional, not nutritional. From a health perspective, this shift matters. Bread made with a long list of processing aids behaves differently once consumed. The natural breakdown that occurs with simpler bread is altered when ingredients are introduced to override aging and structural change. Instead of food that works with the body's expectations, you're eating a product that has been engineered to hold its form and softness far longer than nature intended. That doesn't make it immediately dangerous, but it does mean it's no longer neutral. What's concerning is how quietly this change happened. The bread still looks the same, it's still sold as a daily staple, but the recipe has moved away from nourishment and towards control. Control over texture, timing, and consistency. And when food is redesigned around those priorities, health becomes secondary. The ingredient list already feels unsettling. The next point brings it closer to home, because the real goal of these changes isn't taste or tradition, but how long bread can sit on a shelf without being questioned. Designed for shelf life, not eating. At some point, the purpose of supermarket bread quietly changed. It stopped being something made primarily to be eaten fresh and became something designed to last. Once shelf life became the priority, every decision in the process started to revolve around how long the bread could stay soft, stable, and sellable rather than how naturally it was made. That shift explains why modern bread feels consistent in a way food normally isn't. To achieve that consistency, bread is engineered to behave predictably. Moisture is tightly controlled, textures are reinforced, and ingredients are chosen specifically to delay staling and visible spoilage. These changes make bread easier to stack, transport, and sell across thousands of stores, but they also move it further away from traditional food. The longer bread is expected to last, the more intervention is required to stop it from drying out, hardening, or breaking down on its own. From a health perspective, this matters because food designed for endurance is not designed with the body in mind. Bread that has been stabilized to resist time is also bread that resists natural change after it's eaten. Instead of breaking down in a straightforward way, it carries the effects of the same treatments that kept it shelf-ready. The priority is not how gently the body can process it, but how long it can sit unchanged before someone buys it. This is also where many shoppers lose visibility. Shelf life decisions happen long before the bread reaches the aisle, and they're rarely communicated clearly. What you see is a soft loaf that appears harmless and familiar. What you don't see is how much of its design was driven by storage, waste reduction, and profit margins rather than nourishment. Before we go any further, if this is the kind of breakdown you find useful, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps more people see this information and make sure you don't miss the next investigations, because the next point exposes something even more misleading. The moment when people assume bread has gone bad, even though something else is actually being held back. Why mold is delayed. For most people, mold has always been the clear signal that bread has reached the end of its life. It's unpleasant, but it's also useful. It tells you that time has passed and that the food is no longer safe or worthwhile to eat. With supermarket bread, that signal is often delayed far beyond what feels natural. Loaves can sit on kitchen counters or in cupboards for days, sometimes well past a week, without showing any visible mold at all. Many people take that as a sign of freshness or even quality without stopping to ask why it's happening. In reality, mold doesn't just fail to appear. When it's delayed, it's because the environment inside the bread has been deliberately altered. Modern supermarket bread is treated in ways that suppress the growth of mold and other microorganisms. This can involve preservatives, acidity regulators, moisture control, and processing steps designed to create conditions where spoilage happens more slowly. These methods are highly effective from a commercial point of view because they reduce waste and extend how long bread can be sold and consumed. The health concern is that mold is part of the natural warning system built into food. When that system is chemically slowed down, people lose an important point of reference. Bread can look fine, feel soft, and smell normal while still being far removed from its original state. The absence of mold doesn't mean the bread is fresh in a meaningful sense. It often just means that visible spoilage has been postponed. What you don't see is how the nutritional quality continues to decline and how the bread's structure has been altered to prioritize shelf life over natural behavior. This becomes more significant when it's not an occasional product, but a daily staple. Regularly consuming bread that has been designed to resist microbial activity means regularly consuming food that has been chemically stabilized to override natural processes. Over time, that shifts what people consider normal and acceptable, even though it's very different from how bread has behaved for most of human history. The longer mold is delayed, the easier it becomes to trust bread that no longer gives honest signals about its age. This uncertainty is made worse by what comes next, because even when shoppers start to question freshness, the words on the packaging are carefully chosen to reassure rather than inform. Labels that sound reassuring. When something about food feels slightly off, most people instinctively turn to the packaging for reassurance. With supermarket bread, that reassurance comes in the form of familiar, comforting language. Words like fresh, baked today, bakery style, or artisan are designed to trigger trust. They suggest simplicity, care, and a short journey from oven to shelf. Over time, that language becomes powerful enough that people stop questioning the product itself. The issue is that these labels describe an image, not a process. Fresh does not mean the bread hasn't been chemically treated. Baked today often refers only to the final heating stage, not when the dough was actually made. Bakery style has no obligation to reflect traditional methods at all. These terms are legally permitted because they focus on presentation, not on how the bread was formulated, stored, or stabilized before it reached the shelf. From a health perspective, this creates a serious disconnect. The language encourages people to treat this bread as a natural, everyday staple, similar to something baked at home or bought from a local baker. In reality, many of these loaves rely on preservatives, conditioners, and processing aids that allow them to behave in ways real bread does not. When packaging reassures instead of informing, it lowers people's guard and normalizes regular consumption of food that has been heavily engineered for shelf life. This is especially concerning because bread is eaten daily, often without much thought. Reassuring labels help maintain that habit while masking the extent of processing behind the product. Over time, words replace warning signs, and trust is placed in packaging rather than in how food naturally behaves. This is where the issue becomes personal, because once bread is altered this heavily to survive longer and sell better, it doesn't just change how it looks on the shelf, it changes how the body has to deal with it, which is exactly what we need to talk about next. Bread your body struggles with. By the time bread has been altered to last longer, resist mold, stay soft, and look the same week after week, it doesn't just behave differently on the shelf, it behaves differently once it's eaten. This is the connection most people never make. The changes designed to control bread outside the body don't magically stop at consumption. They carry through. Traditional bread is relatively simple. It's mixed, fermented, baked, and then it begins to change naturally. That process creates a structure the body recognizes and knows how to break down. Modern supermarket bread is built differently. It's formulated to resist change. Stabilizers, conditioners, emulsifiers, and other processing aids are used to reinforce the dough so it holds moisture, elasticity, and shape for as long as possible. That reinforced structure remains when you eat it. From a health perspective, this matters because digestion relies on food breaking down in expected ways. When bread has been chemically supported to stay intact, the body has to work harder to deal with it. Many people notice that bread now feels heavier than it used to, that it lingers, or that it causes discomfort they don't associate with other foods. While individual responses vary, the common factor is a product that has been engineered for durability rather than digestibility. The concern isn't that one slice causes immediate harm, it's that this kind of bread is eaten daily, often multiple times a day, by people who believe they're consuming a simple, familiar staple. Over time, repeated exposure to food that's been designed to override natural breakdown can shift how the body responds to it. What was once nourishing becomes something the body has to manage, and this brings everything together. Shelf life, delayed mold, reassuring labels, and digestive strain aren't separate issues. They're all symptoms of the same design. Choice. Once you see that connection, the final reason this bread never goes off becomes clear. This is why it never goes off. When you step back and connect all the pieces, it becomes clear that supermarket bread staying fresh is not an accident or a happy coincidence. It is the result of deliberate design choices made long before the loaf ever reaches the shelf. Modern supermarket bread is created within a system that prioritizes predictability, long shelf life, and mass distribution. To make that possible, bread had to be transformed from a short-lived food into a controlled product that behaves the same way day after day. In traditional bread making, aging is unavoidable. Moisture slowly escapes, starches harden, and microorganisms eventually cause spoilage. Those changes are not defects. They are signs that the food is natural and unprotected. Supermarket bread is engineered to suppress those signals. Preservatives are used to slow microbial growth, conditioners are added to keep the crumbs soft, and emulsifiers help maintain structure and elasticity long after baking. Together, these interventions prevent the bread from giving honest signs that time has passed. The health concern is not just the presence of individual additives, but the overall effect of redesigning a staple food around endurance rather than nourishment. Bread that is built to resist aging is also built to resist natural breakdown once eaten. The body is left processing food that has been chemically stabilized to hold its form, rather than food that changes and breaks down easily. When this becomes a daily habit rather than an occasional choice, the impact is cumulative, not immediate, which is why many people never connect bread with discomfort or long-term health changes. What makes this situation especially troubling is how quietly it happened. The bread didn't suddenly look different. It didn't arrive with a warning label. It remained soft, familiar, and reassuring. Over time, people adjusted their expectations, accepting that bread lasting far longer than it should was normal. In reality, that extended freshness is the clearest sign that the product has been fundamentally altered to serve the supply chain first and the consumer second. Understanding this is where control begins to return. Once you recognize that bread which never goes off has been engineered to behave that way, you can start questioning what you're being sold as fresh. You can pay attention to how bread ages, how quickly it changes, and how your body responds to it. Real bread doesn't fight time. It changes, it dries, and it eventually goes off. And that's not a flaw. It's proof that it's food, not a manufactured product designed to last at any cost. What this really means for you. By now, one thing should be clear. Supermarket bread that never goes off isn't fresh in the way most people understand freshness. It lasts because it's been redesigned to last. Chemical treatments, processing, aids, and industrial shortcuts have quietly replaced time, simplicity, and natural aging. What looks convenient on the shelf comes at the cost of transparency, and potentially at the cost of health when this bread is eaten day after day. This doesn't mean bread itself is the problem. Bread has fed people for thousands of years. The issue is how far modern supermarket bread has drifted from what it once was. When a staple food is engineered to resist mold, resist staling, resist change, and still be sold as fresh, it stops behaving like real food. And when food stops behaving honestly, it becomes much harder for shoppers to make informed choices. The good news is that awareness changes everything. Once you know what to look for, the signs are there. Bread that lasts unnaturally long, ingredient lists that read like technical manuals, labels that reassure without explaining. These are not reasons to panic, they're reasons to pause. Real bread doesn't need to be immortal, it needs to be simple, short-lived, and honest about when it's past its best. If you want to regain some control, start small. Pay attention to how bread ages. Notice how long it takes to dry out or go stale. Look for shorter ingredient lists. Consider bread that behaves the way bread always used to, even if it doesn't last as long. Food that changes with time is not failing. It's doing what food is meant to do. If this breakdown helped you see something you hadn't noticed before, let me know in the comments. What surprised you most about supermarket bread? And are there other everyday foods you want us to investigate next? If you found this useful, please like the video and subscribe. It helps this channel reach more people who just want clear, honest explanations about the food they buy every week. And if you think someone in your family still trusts fresh supermarket bread without question, share this with them. Because once you see why it never goes off, you can't unsee it.